So an increase in beehive theft is threatening South Africa's honey industry, we're told. With the cost of hives anything between 1,500 rand and 3,000 rand, the losses are quite substantial. The beehives are not just for commercial use, but also an integral part of the food production chain. Now, beekeepers are now warning that if this trend continues unchecked, it could have a negative impact on things like food security. Let's understand this issue a bit better now. Bring in the chair of the Northern Province Beekeepers Association, Steenkamp, who joins us via our telephone line this morning. Jan, thanks for making time. Great to chat to you on the AM report. To people outside the industry, two things. This might be the first time they're hearing of it, and even then, they can easily dismiss the theft of beehives as a petty crime. What's at stake here?
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me on your program this morning. It has been escalating the last few years. The beehive problem, theft problem, is just escalating, and it's getting worse and worse and worse every year. So far this season, like you guys have seen on YouTube and so on, the guys in KZN, they suffered some huge losses. Recently, there's been some devastating losses in the Western Cape as well. Even up here in the Limpopo area where we are operating, we've been sitting with a major problem of vandalism of beehives and the theft of beehives. I mean, the guys are just cutting out the honey. I do understand, and I can relate with it. Due to the current COVID situation, a lot of people lost their jobs, and somehow, somewhere, they have to earn an income. But man, it is devastating to us as beekeepers. The costs are astronomical, and we're struggling to keep our heads above the water.
Wow. Help us understand the illicit market that follows thereafter, because part of what I've learned is that in some instances they then sell on the empty beehive. How useful or valuable is that? No, I lost you for a second there, please. Can you repeat the question? Sure, no problem. Essentially, I'm just trying to get a sense of what happens after the theft or the crime is committed. In some instances, we're told that empty beehives are sold on. How valuable is that commodity?
Yeah, you see, after they vandalize the hives, all the bees are moving out. So you have to replace all your frames. You have to re-establish a new swarm in that hive. It takes you a whole year that before you can start thinking of producing honey. And in the meantime, as we've all got pollination contracts lined up, where we committed ourselves to do pollination on the blueberries, on the macadamias and avos and lychees, and now you're running short of 400 to 500 hives that have been vandalized throughout the season. So it's a loss of income for us as beekeepers. Those guys that you have to do pollination for, they're not getting a proper pollination cycle through on their trees. So yeah, it's a ripple effect, and the ripples are just getting bigger and bigger. At the end of the day, there might be people that are going to lose their jobs because the trees are not producing.
Sure. It also comes at a time, of course, as we try to fight things like COVID-19 and other illnesses that come up in winter. A lot of people will have remedies that actually include honey. That suggests to me that there's obviously an increase in the demand for honey. How is this crime affecting the supply of honey?
It is, in the current situation in South Africa, we as the local beekeepers in South Africa, we cannot keep up with demand. That's why there's huge volumes of honey being imported into South Africa. But for the guys that need and insist on local honey, locally produced honey, there's a shortage of local honey. And with all these crimes that's going on at the moment, there's a lot of the honey is being sold on the streets. They're selling it for cheaper to the public on the streets. So that honey is also getting back into the population. I mean, the guys are using that honey. But for us as beekeepers that got contracts to supply honey to certain entities, you're running short, and those guys are forced to go and acquire some honey from, from the importers and from the big bottlers. That's all importing honey.
Yeah, help us put that problem in perspective, Jan, if you can. Is it abnormal for South Africa to be importing honey? Typically speaking, is that a problem we've ever had?
So no, it is not a problem. It is not a. South Africa's been importing honey for quite a while, and the imported honey. That's what ensures that we as local beekeepers do have some shelf space in the retail shops. If it wasn't for those guys that's importing honey, we wouldn't have a very, very small spaces on the shelf space. They put honey on the market every day because they're importing. They can get the necessary volumes from outside,
right,
to ensure that there's shelf space for honey on all the retailers.
Mm. The other, I guess, issue which makes this quite a multi-layered problem is that the populations of bees have been on the decline for several years as well. They're being removed, these bees, so abruptly from these hives. How do you think that's affecting the bees' ability to reproduce and, I guess, continue existing?
It is a problem because 9 out of 10 times those swarms are being killed. So it is a swarm that's lost forever. They're not just harvesting the honey, they're killing off the swarms because they haven't got the right equipment to be able to deal with the hives and to deal with the bees. So they're killing off the bees so they can get hold of the honey. So, and with the declining numbers of bees in South Africa or throughout the world, it is going to create a massive problem in the future.
Sure.
Just to give you an example, 30 years ago, if you wanted to, on a sunflower season, if you wanted to catch 300 hives, you just take 300 Indian hives and you put them on the sunflower fields, and within a week, they were all filled with bees. This season and the previous seasons, if you wanted to catch 300 swarms for the season, you have to put out 1,000 hives to be able to say, well, in the end of the season, I caught 300 swarms. So there's been a hell of a decline in the bee population in South Africa. And we will have to start looking after our bees and our bee resources to be able to sustain the bee population in the future.
Absolutely. Very quickly, Jan, what does the solution look like? Are you asking for more help from law enforcement, essentially, to try to catch these criminals?
Sir, yes, that will help. That will help a lot. If we can get more help from law enforcement, and there's some codexes that need to be changed with Department of Agriculture, so our beehives can be classified as stock. So we can then move us from plant protection, from plant health to animal health. If we can have that done, we can also go to the police and tell them, listen here, my beehive has been stolen and it is part of stock. It's exactly, it would be the same as a stock theft. At the moment, they're stealing insects. And they're not taking it as serious as stock theft would be taken.
Sure. Interesting insights. Thanks very much indeed for helping us understand this a bit better. I hope we certainly don't drop the ball on this story because, as previously mentioned, we can very easily connect how bee populations and their ability to pollinate could affect eventually things like food security in our country. Jan Steenkamp is the chairman of the Northern Province Beekeepers Association. Once again, Jan, thanks very much indeed for your time.